Okay, let's start today with a bit of
Great.
a mental exercise.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine I've given you unlimited resources to build the perfect base of operations for a global superpower.
Hmm.
You're designing a country that's going to influence the entire world.
Yeah.
What are you putting on your checklist?
Oh, that's easy. You want the basics of stability. You want a rock-solid economy.
Right.
You want political stability, so you aren't worrying about coups or, constant policy changes. And you definitely want infrastructure that doesn't quit reliable power, fast internet.
Smooth roads
Yeah.
and probably a passport that opens every door
Yeah.
effortlessly. You want the haves.
Exactly. That is the standard Western model of influence. Power comes from abundance.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into a set of documents titled Opportunity Amid Challenge, and honestly, it completely flips that logic on its head.
It really does.
It suggests that the next great engine of global influence isn't coming from a place of abundance or stability or, massive GDP.
Yeah.
It's coming from a place of intense pressure. We are talking about the Philippines.
And specifically, the role of the Filipino Church in global missions. The core argument here is it's massive. It's suggesting that the Philippines isn't positioned to become a global sending force despite its poverty, its frequent natural disasters, or its political instability.
But because of them.
Because of that.
Which, I have to be honest, on the surface, sounds a bit like we're romanticizing struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The old suffering is good for your character trope.
I get that. It can definitely sound like that. But the sources we're looking at today go much deeper. They argue that these hardships have created a specific set of sociological and spiritual skills that the rest of the world, specifically the comfortable West, actually lacks. Right? It's what the text refers to as a redemptive inversion.
Stop there, redemptive inversion.
Yeah.
That sounds like a heavy theological term. I want to make sure we really get what that means before we move on. Define that for us.
Think of it like a pressure cooker. In a standard view of success, pressure is bad. You want to alleviate it.
Get the lid off.
Right. But in this inversion model, pressure is actually a manufacturing process. The source draws a direct line to biblical history. Think about Israel being formed while they were in slavery, or the early church expanding rapidly, specifically because persecution scattered them.
So the argument is that comfort produces complacency, but struggle produces clarity.
Precisely. And capacity. I mean, think about it. If your faith has only ever existed in a context where the electricity always works, the government is generally helpful, and your physical safety is guaranteed, you have a somewhat fragile operational model.
You don't know how to function when those supports are kicked away.
You've never had to lift the heavy weights.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you are coming from a context like the Philippines, you are lifting those weights every single day just to survive. And that brings us to the first major pillar in these documents: resilience.
Okay.
But I want to be clear, this isn't just grin and bear it resilience. The text calls it adaptive innovation.
Adaptive innovation. I like that. It sounds active.
It is active. Adaptive innovation is the ability to pivot instantly when the plan fails. And in the Philippines, let's be real, the plan fails often.
All the time.
You're dealing with typhoons, floods, massive traffic gridlock, bureaucratic red tape. It's a daily reality.
The sources actually used Typhoon Haiyan, or Yolanda, as it was known locally back in 2013, as the primary case study for this.
Right.
I remember that news cycle vividly. It was apocalyptic. The devastation was absolute.
It was. And usually when we look at disaster relief in a situation like that, we look at the government or the big international NGOs, the UN, the Red Cross.
Sure.
But the documents highlight a data point that often gets missed. The local church networks were the actual first responders, often long before the big trucks could get through the debris.
But how? If the infrastructure is destroyed for everyone, how is the church operating when the government can't?
Because they didn't rely on the physical infrastructure to begin with, their infrastructure was relational. The source details how pastors and church leaders shifted roles overnight. They didn't wait for a permit. They didn't wait for a paved road. They integrated spiritual care with logistical survival immediately.
I think that's a key distinction. In the West, we tend to compartmentalize everything. We have disaster relief over here, handled by professionals and vests, and spiritual support over here, handled by clergy.
And in Haiyan, those lines just, they dissolved. You had church workers clearing debris with their bare hands, sourcing rice from local connections, and holding funerals for the grieving all at the same time.
Right.
They were practicing what the text calls a theology of stewardship, rather than a theology of scarcity.
Unpack that contrast for us. Scarcity versus stewardship.
Well, the theology of scarcity looks at the situation and says, we cannot act until we have enough money, enough supplies, enough safety. It creates paralysis because in a disaster,
You never have enough.
you never have enough. A theology of stewardship says, what is currently in my hand right now. It parallels that biblical story of the loaves and fish. You don't wait for the surplus. You deploy the little you have immediately, and you trust it to be enough.
So the argument the source is making is that this ability to find calm in the chaos, to innovate when there are no resources, that is a transferable skill.
Precisely. And this is the mission part of the deep dive. If you take a Filipino missionary who has ministered through 3 typhoons and a coup attempt, and you drop them into a volatile region, say a conflict zone in the Middle East,
Right.
or an underdeveloped region in East Africa, they aren't paralyzed by the lack of structure. They recognize the environment. To them, it feels like a Tuesday.
It's a home field advantage in instability.
Which is a massive strategic asset in the modern world because the unreached areas, the places where missionaries are most needed, are almost exclusively unstable, difficult places.
That makes total sense. Now, there's another elephant in the room when we talk about the Philippines. It's not just the weather. It's the migration. We know that the Philippines' biggest export is effectively its people. Nurses, engineers, domestic helpers, sailors. Economically, this is usually framed as a brain drain.
Right. It's usually seen as a tragedy. You're losing your skilled workers because the local economy can't support them.
But the opportunity, amid challenge documents, reframe this entirely. They call it mission dispersal.
This is the most counterintuitive part of the deep dive, and honestly the most fascinating. The text argues that this economic necessity is actually a strategic deployment.
How so?
It compares it to the book of Acts, chapter 8. The church was persecuted and scattered, and the text says wherever they went, they preached.
But are they actually preaching, or are they just working? Because there is a difference between a missionary and a migrant worker.
That's where the distinction lies, and it's crucial. The source material argues that the Filipino diaspora is a sleeping giant. Many are just working, yes. But when they are awakened to their identity, they become the most effective missionaries on the planet.
Why most effective? Is it just about the sheer numbers?
It's about access. Think about a traditional Western missionary. If you want to go to a closed country in the Middle East or parts of Asia, places where Christianity is restricted, how do you get a visa?
You can't.
You can't just say, I'm here to plant a church. You get denied at the border.
Right. You have to have a cover story, you have to start a business or teach English, but you're constantly worried about being found out.
But a Filipino engineer doesn't need a cover story. They're actually needed for the job. A Filipino nanny is invited into the private homes of the elite. A nurse is at the bedside of the dying. They have what we call natural access.
They're embedded.
They are embedded in the culture in a way a traditional outsider never could be.
There was a specific story in the text that illustrated this perfectly. Rosa in Dubai.
Rosa is the archetype of this model. She's a nurse. She didn't move to Dubai with a big missionary agency badge. She didn't raise support in churches. She went to support her family back in Manila. That was her primary driver. But because she carries this resilient faith we talked about, she started noticing the despair among her colleagues.
And this wasn't some formal program, right? She didn't run a hall or put up flyers.
No, and that's the beauty of it. It happened in the break room. It happened in the dormitory. She started informal Bible studies just by asking people how they were doing. The text calls this the multiplier effect. Rosa became a bridge. She connected her local community in Dubai with online discipleship tools and eventually linked them back to prayer networks in the Philippines.
So she effectively built a transnational church network from a break room.
Exactly. And here is the kicker. A professional pastor from the US or Europe could never have done what she did. He wouldn't have been allowed in the building. Rosa was invisible in a geopolitical sense. She's just a nurse, which made her unstoppable in a spiritual sense.
It really challenges the stereotype of what a missionary looks like. We still have this, pith helmet idea. The Westerner coming to save the locals. But this suggests the future of missions is a nurse in scrubs checking vitals who also checks on your soul.
The sources call them missionaries in plain sight. They are already there. Millions of them. The challenge isn't sending them. The challenge is helping them realize that they have already been sent.
This leads us to the how. How do we wake this giant? And surprisingly, the answer isn't just building more seminaries, it's technology.
The digital shift. This is where the documents get very modern and really challenge our assumptions about training.
I have to play devil's advocate here. Usually when I hear about digital missions or virtual training, it feels a bit like slacktivism. Like, I like to post, so I help the world.
Sure, I see that.
But the source material claims technology is changing the actual preparation phase in a deep way.
It is. It's dismantling the geography barrier. In the past, if you wanted to care about a people group in West Africa, you had to read a dusty book, save money for 3 years, fly there, get culture shock, and maybe then you'd understand.
A huge investment.
Huge. Now we have what the source calls digital windows.
Tell us about the university group in Manila mentioned in the case study. This was the virtual immersion project.
This was fascinating. A group of students in Manila participated in a virtual mission exposure week. They didn't leave their classroom, but through live video links, encrypted chats, and digital storytelling, they were interacting directly with persecuted believers in a restricted nation.
But does that actually work? Does it create real empathy, or is it just poverty tourism through a screen?
That's the skeptical question, right? But the outcome data cited in the text says, yes, it works. They found that information turned into intercession. Once the students put a face and a voice to the statistic, once they heard a real person telling their story in real time, their prayer life changed, their financial giving changed.
The phrase the text uses is exposure before engagement.
Right. It lowers the barrier to entry. You don't have to wait until you are 30 and fully funded to develop a burden for the nations. You can get your heart broken for a specific people group while sitting in an internet cafe in Cebu.
It democratizes the burden. You don't need a plane ticket to start caring.
And it allows for better vetting. You can see who actually has the stamina for the burden before you spend thousands of dollars sending them across the ocean.
Speaking of stamina in the next generation, let's talk about the youth, the sending generation. The documents seem a bit frustrated with how the church traditionally handles young people.
Oh, absolutely. The traditional message is, wait your turn. You're the leaders of tomorrow. Sit down, listen to the elders, and one day we'll give you the microphone.
And the source says.
The source screams, no, they're the leaders of today. Specifically because the mission field has changed. If the new mission field is digital, urban, and fast-paced, who are the indigenous experts?
The digital natives.
The digital natives.
There's a profile here of a mentor named Pastor Jose who operates in Southeast Asia. He seems to be bridging this gap between the old guard and the new kids.
Pastor Jose is brilliant because he doesn't just lecture. He uses data-driven discernment.
Okay, that sounds like a corporate buzzword. Data-driven discernment. How does that apply to spiritual work? It sounds cold.
It sounds cold, but it's actually deeply compassionate. Usually, missions is driven by emotion. I feel called to Hawaii. Well, sure, everyone wants to go to Hawaii, but data shows us the gaps.
The margins.
Exactly. Pastor Joss has his youth students looking at digital maps, ethnographic databases, and poverty indexes. They identify where the unreached people groups are, the places with zero access to the gospel, zero access to clean water, and they say, okay, nobody is there. So that is where we focus.
It prevents the duplication of effort. It ensures you aren't just going where it's comfortable.
It's zeal with knowledge. You take that raw, explosive energy of youth, that desire to change the world, and you aim it like a laser using data.
But it's not just data.
No, and then Pastor Joss combines that with dirty hand service. He takes these tech-savvy kids and puts them in rural villages doing literacy workshops and health clinics.
So it's high-tech strategy with low-tech service.
That integration is the future. You cannot be just a digital warrior. You have to touch people, but you also can't just wander aimlessly. You need the map.
I want to zoom out for a second. We've talked about the present and the future, but the source material grounds this entire discussion in history. It contrasts two figures, Vicente Hilario and a modern nurse named Maria. I found this comparison really grounding.
It is. It shows that this isn't a new fad. This is a legacy.
Let's start with Vicente, early 20th century.
Picture the context. The Philippines is still reeling from Spanish colonization, then American occupation. Poverty is rampant. The nation is trying to figure out its own identity.
Right.
And in the middle of all of that, Vicente Hilario packs his bags and goes to China as a missionary.
That is objectively wild. A colonized person from a poor nation going to a foreign land, not to work, but to give.
It breaks every sociological rule. A poor nation isn't supposed to send missionaries. They are supposed to receive them. But Vicente didn't wait for his country to be rich. He didn't wait for political stability. He had a vision that transcended his borders. He represents the deep roots, the DNA of Filipino missions.
And then we have Maria, his modern counterpart.
Maria is working in East Africa today in a refugee camp. The conditions are harsh, but unlike Vicente, she is a trained professional. She is a registered nurse.
She has a skill that the host country desperately needs.
Correct. Vicente had to rely on traditional missionary support, which was always precarious. Maria is sustainable. She integrates her medical skills with her witness. She binds wounds, she delivers babies, and in that process, she earns the right to speak into people's lives.
It seems like Maria is the evolved form of Vicente. Same heart, better tools.
The text summarizes their connection with the phrase, obedience over comfort. Whether it was 1920 or 2026, the defining characteristic of the Filipino missionary is the willingness to choose the hard path.
That phrase, obedience over comfort, is haunting. It really forces a self-reflection. Because most of us, if we are honest, optimize our lives for comfort.
We do.
We optimize for the shortest commute, the softest chair, the safest investment.
And the source argues that optimization for comfort is the enemy of global impact. You cannot change the world while insulating yourself from it.
So for the listener tuning in right now, maybe they aren't Filipino, maybe they aren't a nurse, maybe they aren't planning to move to a refugee camp. What is the takeaway? Because this can feel overwhelming. Do I have to move to a war zone to matter?
No, and the source material actually anticipates that panic. It offers two very practical audits for anyone to run on their own life.
I love a practical checklist. Let's hear them.
First is the skill audit. It asks you to strip away your job title and look at your raw verbs. What can you do? Can you code? Can you teach English? Can you manage a spreadsheet? Can you cook?
And then asking, how can this serve a global need?
Right. Stop thinking you need a theology degree to be useful. If you can code, there are mission agencies desperate for secure communication platforms. If you can teach, there are diaspora communities in your own city that need tutoring. It's about realizing your secular skills are actually sacred tools.
It dissolves the divide between clergy and laity. Everyone is on the roster. What's the second audit?
The mental bandwidth audit. This one hurts a little more. It asks us to look at what we consume.
Our attention diet.
Exactly. We have finite mental energy. If we spend 90% of it doom-scrolling political news or watching cat videos, we have zero capacity left to care about the world.
Yeah.
The audit asks, can you reclaim 15 minutes? Can you replace 1 hour of scrolling with 1 hour of learning about an unreached people group?
It's about kingdom levers.
Yes. High-impact usage of small amounts of time. You don't have to sell everything and move to Africa tomorrow, but you can start by shifting your attention today.
Throughout this deep dive, I keep circling back to that opening paradox. The idea that the very things we complain about, the traffic, the storms, the instability, are the gym equipment.
It's a radical thought, isn't it? We spend so much time praying for our problems to go away.
Lord, make my life easy.
But this material suggests that maybe we should be asking, Lord, what are you training me for? If you see your struggle as a burden, you become a victim. But if you see your struggle as a boot camp, you become a soldier. You become a sender.
That shift in perspective changes everything. It turns the victim mentality into a victor mentality without denying the pain. The pain is real, but it has a purpose.
And that is the secret weapon of the Filipino Church. They haven't avoided the fire. They've been forged by it.
So here is the final thought for you, listening right now. Look at your own challenges. Look at the things that frustrate you, the limitations in your life. What if those aren't barriers? What if that is your resume for your next assignment?
Don't wait for the perfect conditions. The perfect conditions never come. Start with what is in your hand.
Whether that's a nursing degree, a smartphone, or just a story of survival. The sending generation isn't a club you join later. It's a decision you make now.
Truly.
This has been an incredibly challenging but hopeful deep dive. Thanks for unpacking this with me.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep diving deep. We'll see you on the next one.